The opening shows a nice specimen of the male population, Andy Cobb, chopping wood. Nestled in the peaceful countryside of Udown, a quaint English town, there's a delightful cottage where writers from all over the United Kingdom gather to enjoy this little piece of paradise. In the midst of summer, the writers' retreat is buzzing with a diverse group of authors, taking a break to work on their individual novels. The writers are writing passionately. Beth Hardiment, the caretaker, not only serves up nourishing meals, but also provides words of encouragement to the writers. Married for 25 years to the well-known author Nicholas Hardiment, who created the famed character Inchcoombe, they've been running this retreat together for quite some time. The teenage girls of the town, Jody and Casey, spot a taxi driving up the street, which is strange, because nothing ever like that often comes to Udown. One day, Nicholas is surprised when Nadia Patel, his secret side check, gives him a call to inform him of her arrival in Udown. This catches Nicholas off guard, as he hadn't expected Nadia to be so close to him and his wife. So, Nicholas tells Nadia to stay in a pub. After quickly wrapping up the call, Beth enters the scene and asks about the conversation. Nicholas swiftly comes up with a cover story, mentioning his plan to go to town for an evening drink to think about the forensic bits in the novel. Nicholas lies about the call. Beth, though sensing something, offers to join him, suggesting a pleasant dinner together. Meanwhile, Andy Cobb works as Beth's assistant in the Hardiment farmhouse. He tends to the animals and looks after the crops. On that particular day, Andy notices Beth's growing distress. Expressing his concern, he asks if everything is all right, and she puts on a brave smile, saying that she's chill. Meanwhile, Tamara Drew, a young and attractive woman, returns to Udown after an extended absence. As she drives down the town's first street, her car becomes the target of a two-egg assault, thanks to Jody Long and Casey Shaw, who are high school pranksters. Not minding it, Tamara continues to her childhood home, now deserted since her mother's passing. But Tamara says the town is a dump. As the night descends, the writers at the retreat gather for an open-air dinner. Their peace is shattered by a sudden disturbance outside, where Beth and Nicholas are engaged in a heated argument. Nicholas persistently tries to dissuade Beth from joining him that evening by pointing out that her clothes are inappropriate, and making lots of awful excuses so Beth won't come along. Beth has smelled something fishy already, so she confronts him about the affair, and demands to know the identity of the other woman Nicholas is going to meet. Nicholas admits later who she is, Nadia Patel, whom he wrote as a character in his book. Nicholas says it was only once or twice, trying to offer feeble justifications, claiming it allowed him to discover things for creative freedom and using other excuses for his unfaithful behavior, making Beth angrier. In a stern tone, she warns him that he's unwelcome in the house if he chooses to see Nadia. Andy overhears it. The novelists see the interactions, angry at their hosts. Nicholas goes up to the novelists, maybe to talk to them that it's fine. The writer Pippa tells him that Beth deals with everything, such as typing the manuscript, talking to the agents, and providing insights. They clearly resent Nicholas. Nicholas overhears it, and he drives away. The writers talk about the couple and wonder what will happen between them. Beth deals with it, thinking of Nadia Patel and how Nicholas has described her in his book. Nadia waits at the pub for Nicholas. Nicholas eventually picks up Nadia to drive her back to London. Tamara shows up in the pub and inn. She orders drinks and explains that she's a journalist who lived there. She gets a room above the inn. Andy comes into the pub, orders a drink, and tells the female bartender that he will never try to get married. The female bartender, Zoe, jokes that Andy is an object of desire, and no one will have him. As Tamara is taking a bath, she inspects her face strangely with her nose. The next day, Andy and Ben talk. Glenn and Andy witness Beth looking distressed while Beth gives him instructions. Glenn tells Andy that Beth is nice, but the husband is a sleaze. Beth is scraping clean the chicken's coop. Andy tries to comfort Beth after her intense argument with Nicholas. She retreats to her room in distress, and Nicholas follows, offering an apology and some explanation. Despite the challenging situation, Beth forgives him, and they reconcile. Unbeknownst to the couple, the nearest bathroom is currently occupied by the American writer, Glenn. Glenn, who had admired Nicholas's room filled with awards, can't help but feel a twinge of envy for the man's accomplishments. He has also developed a close bond with Beth and Andy during his time there, and feels contempt for Nicholas. In an amusing turn of events, Glenn ends up stuck in the bathroom while the Hardingtons reconcile in the next room. After this mishap, Glenn makes his way outside and hears an alarm going off from the abandoned Drew residence. Glenn and Andy walk directly to the source of the alarm. Andy says the place belonged to Andy's grandparents before, but was driven away because of prices going up. The Drews are the new occupants. Andy remembers a childhood of him teasing Tamara, who had a larger hooked nose. Andy and Glenn see Tamara hammering the wall of the house. Andy could not recognize her at first, but Tamara recognizes him. Andy helps Tamara turn off the alarm. Andy and Tamara catch up, where Andy reveals that he hasn't gone to college, so he became involved in animal care and horticulture. Andy has done some work for Tamara's mom. Glenn appreciates the house, but Tamara is choosing to sell it anyway. But Andy is more curious about her big nose. But Tamara jokes that it was stolen by aliens. Turns out, Andy and Tamara had a heated relationship when they were younger. Andy says now that Tamara has become different. Meanwhile, Jody and Casey find shelter under a waiting shed, reading a teen magazine as their hobby, fantasizing about the boys in the magazine. Casey discloses that she has to assist at the writer's retreat due to her parents' request. Casey contributes by distributing snacks to the writers, eventually offering some to Glenn, who's engaged in a conversation with Nicholas. Perceiving Nicholas as a bit of a sleazebag, Glenn subtly belittles his work. Though wounded, Nicholas refrains from retaliation out of courtesy, a fact not lost on Glenn. Unexpectedly, Tamara arrives at the writer's retreat, stunning everyone present. Some recognize her from the news column she writes, while Nicholas gazes at Tamara with evident desire. Beth warmly welcomes Tamara, and they engage in a conversation about Tamara's mother in the house. Tamara requests Beth's assistance in finding someone to help renovate the house, but several men, and even a woman writing a lesbian crime novel, eagerly volunteer. Tamara, however, insists on having Andy assist her with the renovation. Back in the kitchen, Beth expresses irritation about Tamara's shortest shorts, then talks about Tamara. Glenn and Tamara converse, where Glenn asks why Tamara has changed her face. They talk about writing, where Tamara expresses her desire to publish an autobiography and fiction before turning 30. Tamara, however, talks about the challenges of being taken seriously with her new appearance. At the pub, Glenn tells Andy to woo Tamara, suggesting that marrying her would be a way for Andy to regain access to the ancestral house. Andy reveals his own failures, his graphic business went down, and his investment in Ganya got busted. He also expresses doubt that Tamara would fall for him again, given that he dumped her when she was younger than him. The breakup ended with Tamara making Andy's nose bleed. Andy lays out the catalogs for the house renovations. While doing so, Andy can't help but be enchanted by Tamara's new beauty. Tamara is set to interview Ben Sargent, the rock star drummer of the band Swipe. During Swipe's performance, Ben causes a disturbance, upon seeing his girlfriend playing the guitar and being intimate with the frontman. Despite attempts to restrain Ben, the situation intensifies, leading to him accidentally falling onto Tamara backstage. Tamara takes the chance to ask Ben for an interview. Later on, Casey and their friends are having conversations, and Ben's car passes by them. Casey runs after him and his yellow bright car and the dog. They head over to Tamara's house, promptly discarding the pretense of the interview for some intimate moments. Intrigued, the young girls decide to tail him to Tamara's place, discreetly concealing themselves to observe the couple from outside. Andy arrives with a handful of freshly picked mushrooms, and is surprised to find Ben's dog, Boss, stationed in front of Tamara's door. Upon entering the house, he spots 2 empty bottles and scattered clothes on the floor. While ascending the stairs, Andy stops when he hears the sound of Tamara's moans emanating from her bedroom. Royally pissed, he storms back outside, angrily tossing the mushrooms he just picked. During the progression of days, autumn descends upon them, and Glenn and Beth's connection continues to grow. Beth finds solace in Glenn's sincerity and thoughtful gestures. Glenn tells Beth about the novel he is writing. Beth wonders why the ideas can't come to Glenn. Beth gives her advice on it while they fix the tractor. One evening, Nicholas hosts his regular cue and a session with his mostly female local fans. In reality, the entire dinner is a self-congratulatory display of fan admiration for him, with Nicholas pretending to be humble. Nicholas passively slights Glenn. So, Glenn steps in to assist Beth by arranging the dessert table. While Nicholas expounds that writers are deceitful liars, Glenn interjects with the quote, "The basis of all excellence is truth." Nicholas and his groupies are quickly hushed by this statement, making Nicholas uneasy. As Ben and Tamara continue their relationship, Andy becomes more and more annoyed, especially since even Beth appreciates Ben. Frustrated, he shares his feelings with his casual fling, Zoe. The situation escalates when Boss, the dog, causes a ruckus by agitating the cows at a neighbor's farm. This prompts Beth to keep him on a leash to avoid potential trouble, as the neighbors warned of shooting him if he continued distressing the cows. On that day, Ben casually proposes to Tamara, presenting her with a ring, and she agrees. Tamara, though, can't believe Ben loves her already. Ben tells Beth and Nicholas that he is engaged to Tamara, which surprises Nicholas. Beth later on makes a comment about the relationship between Ben and Tamara, but Nicholas mocks her. Later, Nicholas is at the other side of the house, playing Peeping Tom on Tamara and Ben. However, as winter sets in, a chill begins to seep into Ben and Tamara's relationship. The trouble starts when Tamara discovers that the ring Ben gave her for the proposal was originally meant for his ex-girlfriend. In a subsequent evening, the couple attends Nicholas's book signing, where Tamara flaunts Ben to the writer, seeking a bit of revenge for the rejection she faced during her teenage years. Meanwhile, Jody and Casey are still staking out Tamara's house. Casey thinks Ben needs her, and is getting those teenage delusions. On that very night, fueled by fangirl excitement, Jody and Casey invade Tamara's house. They ransack Ben's belongings and snatch one of his shirts before the couple returns. Tamara, though, wants to show Ben off. but Ben is uninterested and dislikes the scene. A heated argument ensues between Ben and Tamara, debating whether to head back to London, where Ben feels bored in the countryside, or stay, considering it's more conducive for Tamara's writing. Ben and Andy have a face-off encounter, but Andy shoos him off. Afterward, Tamara faces challenges in her writing endeavors in London, particularly with Ben's ongoing drum practice. During one afternoon, Andy reaches out to Tamara, seeking advice on what to do with the shed. After a playful exchange about the shed's fate, Tamara and Andy decide to preserve it. The shed holds sentimental value for both of them, being the place where they first expressed their love. Once Andy completes the house, Jody and Casey visit to inspect it. Jody disapproves of the classic theme, envisioning it as something unsuitable for Ben's taste, while Casey praises Uncle Andy's tasteful work on the house. Jody starts going on about her teenage fantasies concerning the drummer, but Casey tunes out her ramblings. Casey is too absorbed in reading Tamara's manuscript, an autobiographical novel that recounts her early life. Through this, Casey realizes that Tamara is just a very sad girl. Later, Beth can't help but suspect Nicholas is becoming unfaithful again. Jody's growing obsession with Ben leads her to tamper with Tamara's computer at her house. Much to Casey's disbelief, Jody sends an email to Ben, Andy, and Nicholas, pretending to be Tamara. The fact that it was also sent to 2 other guys fuels Ben's jealousy, ultimately causing the breakdown of their relationship. Tamara calls Andy to check if someone got into the house. Ben and Tamara fight, and Ben goes back to his ex-girlfriend, who is pregnant. In the magazines, it is published that Ben is the father. Jody is disappointed, and more worried because Ben is not coming back. Heartbroken, Tamara returns to Ueden. Jody's email heightens Beth's suspicions regarding Nicholas, while the pragmatic Andy contacts Tamara to clarify the entire situation. Upon her return home, Tamara rushes to find Andy, only to cross paths with Nicholas, who's trying to initiate an intimate encounter. Despite Tamara's clear denial of being the email sender, the shameless married writer persists in his advances. Later, at the bar, Tamara witnesses Andy kissing Zoe, further breaking her already shattered heart. Distressed and vulnerable, she doesn't resist when Nicholas eventually arrives at her house for an intimate encounter. With the arrival of spring, Glenn returns to the retreat to continue his writing, having pleased his editor with his previous work there. Beth picks him up. Meanwhile, Nicholas and Tamara continue their ongoing affair. As Jody and Casey maintain their vigilant watch over Tamara, Andy decides to visit her, extending an invitation for a drink, but she is there with Nicholas. Despite Tamara's refusal due to her writing commitments, Andy is about to leave, but he notices Nicholas's red scarf hanging on Tamara's wall. Shortly after, Nicholas makes his exit, leaving the girls shocked after witnessing him and Tamara in a compromising situation. Upon investigating him online, the girls swiftly discover his identity, but are far from impressed, labeling him a D-lister. The more level-headed Casey expresses sympathy for Nicholas's wife. Subsequently, the meddling duo takes matters into their own hands, seeing Nicholas's car. They locate Nicholas's car, concealed in the woods, proceeding to vandalize the tires. Lying in wait until Nicholas seeks Tamara's assistance with the car, Casey and Jody, hidden in a nearby tree, capture the moment of their kiss in a photo. Overcoming initial reservations, they decide to send the image to Beth, aiming to expose Nicholas and rescue her from the affair. Casey and Jody sneak into Tamara's house again and read Ben's message to Tamara, saying that Fran's baby has arrived, but not Ben's. However, he is seeking someone to look after Boss during his stay in Ueden. Jumping immediately at an opportunity, Jody decides to manipulate Ben into returning to town. Using Tamara's email address, Jody instructs Ben to contact her, posing as a reliable dog lover. Witnessing Jody's audacious typing, Casey is incredulous, but Jody pleads with her, emphasizing that if she allows Ben to slip away, she'll end up like her mom, alone, and without a decent snog. Growing increasingly exasperated with Jody's impulsive behavior, Casey eventually distances herself from the situation. Meanwhile, Nicholas is getting ready for a trip to a book festival, where he's scheduled for an interview. Nicholas tells Beth not to come, making up the same excuse that he used on Beth before. Although Beth senses something fishy, she chooses to ignore it. Nicholas drives by and accidentally splashes Casey with water. Casey makes the decision to send the photo of Tamara and Nicholas to Beth. The revelation devastates Beth, and Glenn and Andy attempt to provide comfort. Shortly after, Tamara seeks to talk to Andy, but he's already consumed by anger over what she did to Beth. Andy tells her about Beth's crucial support during his low points, expressing deep gratitude, while Tamara insists it's not his concern. Tamara tells Nicholas that Andy knows, and maybe Beth knows. Nicholas says he doesn't care, and he will leave Beth for Tamara. At the book festival, Beth publicly confronts Nicholas about his chronic womanizing, causing a scene in front of the entire crowd. Tamara, who witnesses the spectacle, is overwhelmed with shame. Despite the embarrassing turn of events, Nicholas shamelessly pursues Tamara, but she decisively terminates their affair on the spot, leaving Nicholas in frustration. Thanks to her recent antics, Jody finally gets the chance to meet Ben. Ignoring Casey's calls about Boss the dog causing chaos on the farm and stressing out the cows, she remains fixated on Ben, who keeps her company until Tamara returns home. Ben confronts her about breaking and entering, and sending random emails to people. Jody confesses to Ben, which lowers his guard. Ben requests something from Jody, or else he will call the cops on her. The request is for Jody to make him tea. Tamara arrives and Ben shows her Jody, the culprit. While all these messy confrontations and problems are happening, Glenn attempts to comfort Beth. Eventually, he confesses his feelings for her, leading to a shared kiss between them. Unfortunately, Nicholas walks into the room and witnesses the scene. Subsequently, he and Beth move outside, where Nicholas attempts to offer an apology. However, at this point, Beth has reached her limit with Nicholas's indiscretions and firmly demands a divorce. In this unfortunate moment, Boss decides to make an appearance. Frustrated, Beth merely shoos the dog away, instead of putting him on a leash. Following this, Nicholas seeks out Glenn, upset about him kissing his wife, whom he's been cheating on for an unknown duration. Discovering Glenn sitting on a stone in a field near the cows, the two men engage in a heated altercation, escalating to pushing and shoving. This results in Nicholas falling and hitting his head against the stone he was previously sitting on. Nicholas does not respond, and Glenn checks on him. Luckily, he wakes up. In a regrettable sequence of events, a stampede of stressed-out cows is rapidly approaching. Glenn attempts to rouse Nicholas and relocate him away from the stampede, but he finds himself unable to lift him or bring him to his senses in time, so he abandons him. Nicholas, barely conscious and in a daze, remains immobile despite the oncoming herd of cows, chased by Boss. When it's over, Glenn checks on Nicholas, who is all bloodied and broken. Jody is confronted by Ben and Tamara. Later, Tamara gives back the ring to Ben, but then Casey arrives to tell them about Boss the dog. The tragic irony lies in the fact that young Jody is indirectly accountable for this incident, as Boss is meant to be under her care. Yet, a life is now lost, and the manipulative little girl won't even know it's her fault. A few moments later, Andy arrives at the farm with a rifle in hand. Boss and prevent any further harm. However, the neighboring landowner fires first, the loud gunshot echoing through the entire neighborhood, alerting Beth, Glenn, and Tamara. Terrified that he might face incarceration, Glenn panics and flees from the scene of Nicholas's demise. Tamara and Beth reach Nicholas's body at roughly the same time. Tamara calls for help and approaches Beth. In her devastation, Beth breaks Tamara's nose out of anger, causing it to bleed, and for her rhinoplasty to break. Andy later talks to Tamara, comforting her. After all the chaos has subsided, Glenn attempts to leave town, as he fears that he will be suspected by the police. However, Andy intercepts him, informing him that Beth is urgently seeking his company. Glenn hurries to Beth's side, offering comfort. She continues to blame herself for the events, regretting not tying the dog or taking any action. In this crucial moment, Glenn attempts unsuccessfully to reveal the truth about Nicholas. Instead, all he manages to convey is a quote. Glenn then notices a poster of Nicholas with prominent text, reading, "That's what storytellers are. Thieves and liars." This realization prompts Glenn to acknowledge that he is not the man he thought he was. He's just another liar in the face of fear. Amid the turmoil, Andy and Tamara finally sort out their feelings and decide to live together in Tamara's house, originally Andy's ancestral home. Now, with her nose bandaged from the injury, Andy casually mentions that he always preferred the old one. Now, Andy can live in his old home like before. Boss is buried, and Ben cries, but Jody comforts him. Then Ben hugs Jody. Very happy, she tells Casey to take photos of them while being hugged by Ben. Excited, she poses.